Good afternoon and welcome to today's ISCA ICAN webinar series on mindset, fixed and growth mindset training. Today we have Tyler Stratum online with us from West Branch Middle School. He's going to lead our discussion today. We are recording our session, so it will be available for review at a later date. It will be posted both on the ICAN and ISCA websites. Some housekeeping before we get started. We're going to keep everyone on mute. We have a pretty large crowd registered today. So we're going to keep everyone on mute. Feel free to type in any questions that you have, and Tyler will address them at the end of the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tyler, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, Britt. I want to say thanks to Britt for helping me out. She's been very flexible with me and making sure that we have time and has made it really easy for us, and I kind of blew her off actually at the beginning of the semester, so she was really generous to say, okay, we'll try it again. So this is really something pretty exciting for me. I've been at West Branch Middle School for 3 years now, and ever since I wanted to be a school counselor, I thought, what can be one thing that can sort of be the hallmark of my school counseling program? And while I was in graduate school, I got to thinking about the academic side of it. That's actually the least important part of it to me, actually, when I was thinking about becoming a school counselor. And part of that might have been because I don't have a degree in education. And so because of that, I had to take a class called Instructional Psychology at UNI with Dr. Elena Joram, and she had us read a book called Self-Theories by Carol Dweck. And it was sort of an ironic thing that this turned into what I think of as the basis of my school counseling program. If anything, school counselors, I think, need to justify their role in the school setting, and if we can get the most bang for our buck in any of that, it could be in academic results and in academic performance enhancement. So this is just it's really a very simple idea. There are a lot of nuances to it, and you can go very deep with it, but even a general knowledge of what the fixed and growth mindsets are can be very beneficial for school counselors. So with that, I want to go over some of my goals for today. The first one is just a brief overview of the growth mindset, and I think it's one of those topics that for a while I kind of almost saw it as a fad. But because I think it's rooted in such solid research and it's such a simple idea, and from my own experience students understand it and can apply it right away, I don't think it's something that's necessarily going to go away either. And so it's a little bit of a balancing act. This is sort of a hot topic at this point. I think most people really have a general idea of what it is, but there's so much more that you can do with it, and I think I've found some really good success with doing that. So I want to do a brief overview of what it is, just because some people may not have heard of it, but I also want to understand that most people may have done a lot of work with this already. And then secondly, maybe most importantly, I know school counselors, especially myself, are looking for concrete ways to implement an idea into a program. And so I want to stimulate some ideas of how you can develop a growth mindset culture in your school. And a lot of that will be based on a book that I read over the summer that's specifically geared toward that. So I'll share some information about that as well. So consider two different student profiles. The first one would be a student who has an over-concern with being right and looking smart, avoiding challenges, has difficulty dealing with setbacks and negative feedback, and doesn't like criticism. The second would be a student who is focused on learning and is willing to take risks. They embrace challenges, and they're persistent when dealt setbacks and accept and use negative feedback and criticism. Okay, so I'm sure most of us can look at those two different profiles and think of one particular student that the first one fits, and a second student that you work with that maybe fits the second one. So what accounts for the difference then? Which one of these do you think describes most of your students? And of course, since the microphones are off and I didn't set up any sort of polling or anything like that, just think about that to yourself. Which one of those profiles, I can go back to them, which one of those seems to describe most of your students? Okay, so that's question one. Question two would be, how can we explain the difference then between these two profiles? How does one student arrive more likely to, more like the first profile? How does another student arrive at a place where they're more like the second profile? Is it genetic? Is it environment? Is it opportunities? Is it the experiences that they've had? And then finally, do your students think of school as an exciting place where learning is the #1 priority, or is it a scary place where they are in constant fear of being evaluated? I'll tell you what, with what I've talked with a lot of my students, I've actually asked them that very question, and most of them think about school as more like the second option. It's actually kind of a scary place where their intelligence is constantly under review, and their worth as a person is judged under criteria that they don't have any control over. And so this isn't to point fingers or blame anyone, but maybe we haven't done a good enough job in helping students understand where their success comes from. And this isn't, again, the fixed mindset and the growth mindset is a way of understanding the psychology of a student, but it's not necessarily a motivational speech that you can give them. It's actually a mindset that they have to develop. I really think of it as a skill. And so that's why I think it's really important that we talk about it. And I'm going to say that the answer to the second question, how we can explain the difference between these two profiles, is which mindset these students have. So some differences then. The fixed mindset is the belief that a person's abilities and intelligence stay the same for their whole life. Now, we may not actually articulate this for ourselves in our own minds or even verbally in that way, but I think most of us, if not all of us, have this idea in mind sometimes. So you'll hear students sometimes say things like, I'm just not a math person, or I just don't like writing because I'm not good at it, something like that. I'm never going to be a good athlete even. That would be a very fixed mindset. Their abilities, their intelligence, I'm just born in the way that I am. Biology and life has just been set up, even fate has set up that I'm just going to be this type of person, and that's just the way it is. The growth mindset, on the other hand, is the belief that a person can improve their abilities and intelligence through their life. And the way that we do that is through effort, persistence, and use of different strategies. And so as educators, we have to take a step back and say, okay, these are two sort of dichotomous ideas. They're totally different from each other. They're mutually exclusive. And yet we probably hold both of these ideas at different times and in different contexts. And so there's a lot of work that you can do with students just thinking about this very idea. This slide right here is a great conversation starter, and I've used it pretty often with students. I'll ask them, which one do you think you're more like? And it's interesting to hear their explanations of why and that sort of thing. Of course, as educators, I think it's important that we push our students toward a more growth mindset. First of all, because it expands their opportunities, but it's actually based, the truth of it is really based in a lot of solid research that we'll talk about later as well. Okay. So there's some effects of the fixed mindset. Again, if we think that our abilities, whether they're good or bad or mediocre, if we think that they're just stuck the way that they are, they're not going to change based on anything in our life, we're just sort of dealt the hand that we are by fate, these students tend to give up easily. If my abilities, if my performance is just set from birth and it's just going to be the way that it is, if I'm not doing well, I might as well give up because there's no reason for me to try. A person with a fixed mindset might think effort is for a person who doesn't have this skill. They just weren't born with it. They're just not that type of person, so they might as well not try it. And in fact, they might even go as far as to say, effort just isn't worth it. Fate has decided for me that this just will not work out. They'll show a lack of interest. And we'll kind of juxtapose this with growth mindset people as well, but sometimes people who have a growth mindset can even find something that isn't intrinsically interesting to them more interesting because they see it as a challenge, and we'll talk about that as well. People with a fixed mindset tend to blame their failures on other factors, and so the self-esteem movement would say don't talk about failures. Don't let people think that they have failed. Focus on the positives, focus on their strengths, which are good things. But I think it's actually also healthy to focus on some failures sometimes. People with a fixed mindset will focus on a failure and they'll internalize that. They'll think of it as an identity. They'll say, yes, I failed because, again, I'm just not good at math. I am a failure. And so obviously that's not a healthy belief that we want our students to have. And sometimes they'll even downplay successes as luck. If a student maybe struggles in science and they happen to do really well in a particular unit or on a test, they might say, well, maybe I just guessed well. And so there's actually a study that Carol Dweck did that I'll talk about later, but that it's really interesting how students can actually look backwards through time and view their successes in the past as not as successful as they were. That may have been confusing, but we'll get there. They also tend to avoid tasks. Again, if they think of school as a place where their intelligence, their worth as a person is constantly under fire and under evaluation, they're going to avoid things that will set them up for failure. They might think, gosh, 7th grade is just too hard for me. I'm just going to skip school a couple days a week because it's stressful to be there and to be thinking about how I'm just not very good at this. That might be somewhat of an extreme example, but it's a real life example as well. And then risk avoidance. I put this one in all capitals, and I hate when people do that, but risk avoidance is a huge issue for the same reason. If this has the opportunity to tell me that I'm not smart based on one data point, even if it's a test or a project, I just don't want to do it because that would be awful if somebody told me that I didn't do well, because that proves that I'm a failure, not very smart. So one clarification is the difference between achievement or ability and the mindsets. So there can be students who have a fixed mindset and low achievement. That's, I think, what we would typically think of. If a student has the belief that their intelligence is just going to stay the same, there's no point in trying because they're always going to be dumb or something like that, of course then they're not going to achieve very well. But there are also fixed mindset students who actually achieve great deals of success in school. And that's dangerous for another reason. That would be that they might think, well, genetics have just said I'm a great writer. Genetics have said I can read really well. Fate says that I'm a good science student. And so if they end up failing at some point, and that does happen for everyone, they have no internal resources to deal with that. They just say, well, guess what? I guess I did just get by on luck, as we were saying before. And actually, this is a good point to jump in and talk about one of Carol Dweck's research studies. I don't remember exactly when she did it. I don't have the attribution for it, but she had students try something difficult, so just simple puzzles that were really difficult to put together after doing simple ones. And with the first simple puzzles, students did really well. They got all of them right. And then later on, she had them do the more difficult ones that they failed at. And then she asked them, do you remember how well you did on the beginning ones? And the students who matched up well with a fixed mindset based on survey research actually downplayed their successes when they got every single one of them right. They said, yeah, I guess I'm just really not very good at these. These more difficult ones were hard. I think I got maybe half of them right the first time. That would be a typical response from a fixed mindset student. So they can look back in the past at some of their successes and say, yeah, I'm just really not that great at that. So if we go over to the right side then of this grid, then you can have growth mindset students who are low achieving. And those are the students I think that most of the work that you could do could really show a lot of growth. Students who maybe haven't achieved as much as other students, but have that mindset, that have those internal resources to persist and try something new and not give up when things aren't going well, to try a different strategy, to take in negative feedback and use it for their benefit. Those are the students you're going to see a lot of growth with. But then, of course, there are also the growth mindset students who achieve high successes in school as well. And those would be, ultimately we want to move all of our students from maybe the top left of the grid to the right, bottom right. I think that's, sort of a typical, whether you really thought about this way or not, most of us would say we want our students to think that they are able to achieve high success based on their efforts, based on trying something new, based on receiving feedback, and that sort of thing, and then go on to achieve high standards in school. So the truth is that fixed and growth mindsets don't actually have anything to do with high or low ability. This is based on what you've been taught, I think, and what's been reinforced by your parents and your teachers. What ultimately do you attribute your success to? Is it genetics and fate, or is it working hard and being persistent? So let's talk about some resources. This was the first book I was telling you about. This book was published in 2000, and it's based on the empirical research on what Carol Dweck, who's a Stanford psychologist, calls the growth mindset. It's actually a pretty short book, and even though it's empirical research, she doesn't go through a whole bunch of the data. She does reference it, but you could read through this in really an afternoon. Well, I'd say a day or maybe a couple of days, not an afternoon. But it's only 155 pages. And it's actually very helpful. There are some surveys in the back that you can take that she's actually used in a lot of her research to help evaluate whether a person tends to have more of a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. One of the things that she mentions in her book is it's actually a mistake to say that this particular student has a fixed mindset and this one has a growth mindset, because as I was saying before, most of us have a little bit of both. But the tendency that we swing toward is what's important. Are you 90% growth mindset, 10% fixed mindset, or do we have a problem where you're 20% fixed growth mindset and 80% fixed mindset? That would be a problem. And so those would be the students that we would, in a sort of simplified way, say have a fixed mindset. If most of the time they tend to think that their abilities just are what they are, and that's not going to change. And this originated in her work on learned helplessness. At the beginning of the book, she introduces how she did some reading about a study with dogs where they would put them in an electrified dog kennel with a fence in the middle and food on the other side. And they would electrify the floor, and the dog would jump over the fence and get the food as the reward. But then what they did was, with another set of dogs, they made the fence so high the dog couldn't jump over it. And what happened with those dogs is they would lay down and just accept their fate, because there's nothing they could do to get away from the electrical shocks, and that was the end of it. So then what they would do after that is they'd run them through another trial without the fence, and the food was right there, and the dogs still didn't go for the food, because they had learned that because there was nothing they could do, they just had to lay there. There was nothing that they could do to get there. Obviously an application of the fixed mindset. Things just are the way they are, and I'm not going anywhere. There's a reward right there, but I haven't been able to do it in the past. Why would I be able to do it now? So what Carol Dweck decided was, hey, maybe this has something to do with the way that students approach school. And so she started surveying students and trying research studies with having students complete puzzles and simple math problems, and then testing to see whether they were successful and if that lined up with their mindset. One note is language difference in the more empirical side of it, especially if you read the actual studies. She'll refer to what we kind of commercially call the growth and fixed mindset as the incremental theory of intelligence, or the mastery response, or the, that should say, entity theory of intelligence, or the helpless response. So do you think of your intelligence as something that is an entity? Is it a trait? Is it something you're just born with? Or is it incremental? Is it something that can go up and down in steps? And of course, again, we want to encourage our students to think about their intelligence as the growth mindset. It's incremental. It's something that can be improved up and down. Maybe think of it as a scale of 1 to 10. Can I move up this year from a 7 to a 9? Could that be possible? And of course, we want them to think that the answer is yes. Some major takeaways from this book is a deeper understanding of the thought processes of the two different mindsets. And I think this is especially helpful for us REBT and CBT oriented counselors. For me, I don't do real well with just, I shouldn't say just, but things like person-centered counseling. I mean, I think it's important to be kind to everyone you interact with, but if there's not some meat, if there's not some thought processes that we can work on, that just doesn't work well for me. And Self Theories is a book that really pushes our understanding of how a person thinks through their own intelligence, and I think that's been incredibly helpful. And at the end, there's a really great section on responses to objections, criticism, and other inquiries about the fixed mindset or the growth mindset. One in particular that I thought was really helpful was when is it okay for a student to give up? And Carol Dweck doesn't, you might expect that she would say, well, it's never okay. If a student has a growth mindset, they should always keep pushing forward all the time. And what she actually says is that the growth mindset allows a student to give up sometimes. It's okay. They're not evaluated as a person if they fail at maybe a particular class or even a skill. They can actually say, all right, this is just something I'm not great at, but that doesn't mean anything about me as a person. A person with a fixed mindset would say, somebody might have seen me fail at that, and what if they think I'm a bad person because of it? Or they might think that person thinks I'm stupid. That's a very fixed mindset idea. And so she actually says the growth mindset allows a student with a reasonable amount of time to actually give up on something. So I think that, in terms of overall mental health and happiness, the growth mindset can actually help us in even more ways than just academic success. Resource number 2 is the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. The first one was Self Theories. The second one is called Mindset. And this is a more mainstream publication. It splits it up into 4 different areas, actually 5 different areas: academics, parenting, business, school, and relationships, as you can see on the cover of the book there. This one was more recent. It came out in 2008. and it expands it to those other areas, as I said, but the academic section is just the first 80 pages. And so that one I actually did read in about an afternoon. It's a very smooth read. It's got some stories in it, and that's if you're not necessarily interested in delving into it as a therapeutic method, but kind of want to have that language to talk to students and the ability to have an intelligent conversation about what they really think about their own intelligence, this is a great resource too. It doesn't go into the studies and that sort of thing, but again, if you just want to be able to have sort of a casual conversation, but meaningful conversation with students about what they think about their own intelligence, this is a great one. And the expansion into other areas, again, I think it's important to understand that this is more of a commercialized book, so maybe this has a little bit of some tendencies of self-help type things, and that's fine. But what school counselors would use it for, I think the first 80 pages or so is really all you would need. Some major takeaways from this one is it's a good general overview, it's easy to read, and it focuses a lot, again, on the attribution of successes and failures. So, for instance, on page 33 it says, failure has been transformed in our culture from an action, which is I failed, to an identity where I am a failure. And I think it's important to understand the difference. That's maybe one of the main reasons to really focus on the growth mindset. So some things that I've done. Okay, so those are a couple of resources. Some things that I've done, and I think, again, this is where a lot of school counselors are looking for specific ways to implement this. I talked with my principal last spring, and I said, you know, that I've been talking with students for 2 years about this. It's really been helpful for some of them. I think it'd be really cool if we developed almost like a growth mindset culture in our school. And a big part of that was that I had been wanting to read this book by Mary Kay Ricci called Mindsets in the Classroom, subtitle Building a Culture of Success and Student Achievement in Schools. And I thought, you know what, that'd be really neat. What if we all kind of got on board and talked about what would it take from a psychological perspective to enhance the academic performance of our students? And so I'm not sure how everyone else's districts work, but we have projects that we can do using TQ money. If you register, 15 hours, I think it is, you can submit a proposal for a project. So that was mine over the summer. And again, a simple book. The book that I read was, again, called Mindsets in the Classroom by Mary Kay Ricci. And it took me about a day to read it, and I put together some notes, and I put together a staff training. And then I also made a couple of signs that I put up in the hallway just to maybe get students thinking about it, and then could be conversation starters. I'm a 5 through 8 counselor, so I did guidance lessons with our 5th graders. Our 6th graders who are in our at-risk program go to a study hall called Learning Strategies. So about once a week I meet up with all those students individually and talk about how things are going. They set academic goals, and I try to reinforce those growth mindset ideas based in that conversation about their goals. And then there's also 6th grade study skills. It's a class they have every 6th day in our 6-day cycle. It's actually every day 3 and 6, or they have it twice in our 6-day cycle. And so in the fall I talk to them about that for about 2 weeks, and we do some different activities that just kind of show why the growth mindset is more beneficial and how it's actually based in good brain research and that sort of thing as well. Then in 8th grade, I do a short unit in our 8th grade to high school transition class. We call it Seminar. There's a short unit that we do where, again, we talk about neuroplasticity and brain research that would support the growth mindset. I give them surveys to sort of do like a pre-test, post-test evaluation to see if they're actually adopting these beliefs, and I found that actually is the case. And again, those surveys can be found in the back of self-theories. There's quite a few modifications of these surveys for young children all the way up to adults. And then there's some videos. I don't think we'll have time to show them, but maybe I can put them on the website somewhere else as well. But basically, if you go to YouTube and type in growth mindset or neuroplasticity, you'll find 100 different things, and most of what I found is actually very good. Here's one of the signs that I was referring back to. So this is on my bulletin board outside my office. It just says, what does my mindset tell me about, and then I either put in effort or failure or persistence or criticism, something like that. And so the person on the left with his head hanging is obviously the fixed mindset, and he might say something glum like, effort doesn't matter, you either get it or you don't. And the person jumping up and down celebrating says, effort's the only way my brain actually learns anything. one of the themes that I use in my guidance lessons with 5th and 6th graders especially is that your brain is like a muscle. The more you use it, the better it gets at what that muscle's for. So if you're learning a language, there's actually a part in your brain that builds up more neural connections and gets stronger and better at what it does the more you practice that skill. Just like if you were to do squats, your legs would get big and strong, but your arms might not. But if you did bicep curls, your arms would get bigger and stronger. So that's just one thing. I swap that out every once in a while and talk to students about it when I can. And I think especially in the middle grades and the younger grades, it's always good to have some fun. So I like a good internet meme just as much as anyone. This is a guide to doing anything. So there's 4 steps of trying something new. And obviously this is an example of the fixed mindset. So students like the cartoon, we talk about it. Why did the person end up sobbing at the end of the cartoon? And what could be different? You know, it's just anything that's kind of fun like that is a great way to get students engaged. This is another graphic that I used, especially with my 5th graders. What most people think on the left side would be a very fixed mindset idea. You're either going to get it the first time or you're going to fail the first time, and that is the end of the road. But what successful people know is that along the way you're probably going to have to fail 5, 6, 7, 8 times. And even using simple examples from my own life has been really helpful. I used an example with my guidance lessons this year about my mishaps with my lawnmower over the summer. I drained a fluid thinking it was the oil, and it turned out it was the transmission fluid, and I had to keep working on it until I figured out which fluid went where, and the belts were all messed up, and I had to figure out where that all went, and I eventually got it to work. But if I would have had a fixed mindset, my yard wouldn't have gotten mowed all summer. That's just, again, a simple example, a real-life example that hopefully they can use to expand these ideas beyond just sort of the abstract. So some new ideas. I guess one of the things that I did with my project of trying to do staff training and all that is I waited until August to start doing that. So I think, you know, if this were to really be implemented starting earlier and thinking about it over the summer, even talking about it in the spring and letting everyone know that this is what you want to work on for next year would be a good idea. And having everyone read even mindset, just the first 80 pages, would be a really simple way to do it. Again, I think over a summer, most teachers would say, yeah, I've got time to read 80 pages of a book and talk about it in the fall when we come back, especially if there are some incentives to do it, like those TQ projects I was talking about. One of the things that I've really benefited from a lot is having my administrator on board. I pitched the idea to her, and she asked me more about the fixed and growth mindset and what it means for students, and she said, yeah, that's really what we want. We want students to understand what it takes to be successful, that it's not something that's either just handed to them or held from them. And then persistence throughout the year is really important. One thing that I did try to do throughout the years, if I saw something about these ideas in the news or on Facebook or whatever, I would shoot out an email to all of our teachers and say, hey, you should read this article. It's talking about the growth mindset, or how to praise students to encourage continued success, and what type of praise, which we can talk about in a minute, actually discourages effort and that sort of thing. So those are a few different ideas that I had for things I might do in the future and keep moving forward with trying to develop this growth mindset culture. So the third resource would be the book Mindsets in the Classroom. This is a very readable book. I think if I remember right, yeah, it was published in 2013. And it has really excellent suggestions about lesson plans for all different grades, everything from kindergarten all the way up to high school. It actually has examples of lesson plans in the back, so you can even poach some of those if you'd like. And one of the cool things about this book is it really focuses on the neuroplasticity side of it. That means, of course, that if you use a part of your brain for a particular function, that function develops and that part of the brain actually becomes more dense with neural connections and that sort of thing, just like muscles in your body. So I think that's a really concrete example, especially for younger students to hold on to and understand. And it has excellent suggestions for why this matters for teachers, not just students. Of course, we want our students to focus on that, but again, how do we have that common language that all teachers can use to push these ideas, and students are getting the same message from all of us, and actually have it be beneficial, not a detriment. One of the quotes from the books, from this book is on page 2, actually, from right at the beginning. Intelligence is a malleable quality and can be developed. This is a growth mindset. Learners with a growth mindset believe that they can learn just about anything. It might take some struggle and some failure, but they understand that with effort and persistence, they can succeed. The focus of growth mindset individuals is on learning, not on looking smart. An educator with a growth mindset believes that with effort and hard work from the learner, all students can demonstrate significant growth, and therefore all students deserve opportunities for challenge. I think that just really helped me understand that the way that teachers, the way that counselors, the way that administrators talk about student success is so important, because the message that we hear sometimes about certain students is, well, this student is low, or this student's smart. This student should do better because they're smarter than that. When the reality is that what we want to see from all students is demonstrating significant growth. It's not that they should do anything in particular. It's that we should see persistence toward growth and a focus on learning, not just looking smart. So again, if teachers and the whole school staff can have that singular focus of academic success, growth, persistence, effort, focus on learning, not focusing on looking smart, I think that's what's really important. One of the studies that Mary Kay Ricci did actually was give kindergartners through third graders a survey about the fixed and growth mindset. And maybe this will highlight why it's so important. With our kindergartners, 0% of them had a fixed mindset. She might have asked them something like, hey, if you're not good at something, what should you do about it? And all the answers that she got were things like, keep trying, try something different, something like that. With our first graders then, I shouldn't say our first graders, but with the ones she interviewed, 10% of them had developed a fixed mindset within that first year. And again, that might be because of the way that we talk about students or talk to students or give them feedback. Third grade, 18% then had developed a fixed mindset, and then by third grade, 42%. I'm not sure if that's sort of the big third grade bump where the academics are pushed a little bit harder generally, but that might be a time when we really start to focus on these ideas, because if students start to fall off at that point, it's going to be harder to right that ship and turn things around for them. So it's really, really important that we start focusing on these ideas from the beginning. Again, we won't probably have time for a video, but if you go into YouTube or whatever video streaming program you use on the internet and just type in neuroplasticity, there's a really great one that was put out, and it has animations and talks about all the history of understanding these ideas, and that's really helpful. So some self-reflection. I think I've mentioned a little bit of this, but how do we reinforce a fixed mindset? There are lots of ways. I think that not intentionally, but we tend to tell students that they're just not good at things, or just as dangerous, we tell students, oh, you're so great at this, you should always be great at this, and it's just going to get through. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. You're a smart kid. That's a fixed mindset. You're just stuck that way. You are smart. You always will be. That's dangerous. And then how do we as educators reinforce a growth mindset? And that's where I think is really important that we start to develop that common language. I think that's why it's important as a whole staff to develop a growth mindset perspective. Some final applications for the classroom. Watch for symptoms of a fixed mindset, especially in the back of the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. There's a really simple flowchart of there's sort of 3 columns. On the left side, it's the fixed mindset. In the middle, there's a concept like failure or even success or successes of other people or criticism or something like that, being asked to redo an assignment. And then on the right side is how a person with a growth mindset would respond. Watch out for those things. We should know what a fixed mindset looks like. Giving up and blaming other people, blaming other factors, avoiding risk, all that kind of stuff would be an example or a sign of a fixed mindset. And of course, we need to constantly check our own beliefs about students' abilities. Yes, there might be some students who have lower abilities. That's just the reality of things. But that doesn't mean they can't be successful. We're actually wasting our time if we think there are some students who have low ability and just won't be as successful as others or show growth. I think growth is the important thing to focus on. And then the place of praise. Just briefly, again, there's a link on that word praise there, but it's in a nutshell, it's most important to praise them for their effort, their persistence, their use of strategies, and do not focus on praising them for their abilities or even their accomplishments, because that reinforces that fixed mindset. You are successful, you are smart, you are athletic, and things just ought to be that way. That's the message that they get. And then align your feedback, which would be verbal or written, with growth mindset language, which we've already talked about a little bit. And then let them struggle. I really like that one a lot, because if we tell students that an adult will rescue them if they're having a hard time, that can reinforce a fixed mindset. So I think it's really important for them to have real-life concrete examples and make a big deal about it when they struggle through learning a little bit and then have to be successful based on their efforts and have real examples of it. So there's the resources that I've listed. There's the book by Mary Kay Ricci and two by Carol Dweck. I didn't put the links for the YouTube videos, but again, if you go to YouTube and type in growth mindset or neuroplasticity, it's easy to find hours and hours and hours of really good, simple resources, everything from TED Talks to animated things to interviews with Carol Dweck, anything like that. At this point, I will take some questions if we have any. Oops. And Britt, is there a way that I can get to the questions if there are some?
Yes, there's the question menu on your right-hand menu. The first question that's in there, while you're getting that up, I'll just read it. Do you think that expecting students to be at grade level is part of fixed mindset?
To be at grade level. I think that could be, because again, we're telling students that they ought to be a certain way right now. And I think actually our special ed department in particular, I'm just thinking about some IEPs that I've been at, our special ed department does a great job of saying that they're doing really great, let's say at a grade level below or two, on a particular maybe reading goal or a math goal, and that we're going to start moving them forward more toward being at grade level. But I don't think that it's, I think it would certainly be a fixed mindset idea to say you ought to be at grade level right now. Let's see. Listening, hi. Is that all of them?
Yep. How have you designed your lessons in mindsets? Is there anyone designing them in K-4 levels in your district?
Yeah, I've talked with our elementary counselor, and she's done a little bit of it. I actually don't know for sure how she's specifically doing that. I'll just be totally honest with you about that. I don't know how she's specifically addressing that off the top of my head. But I know that, again, in the back of Mindsets in the Classroom, there are a lot of actually really great suggestions for simple things that you can do with them. Focusing, if nothing else, on that idea that your brain is like a muscle and you have to use it, and walking through what are the skills that make the brain grow. That's a great place to start.
Will you share any specific lessons you have developed for middle school students?
I can, yeah. Is there a way to do that? Like put them on the like on the ISCA website, or?
Yes, we can do that. We can add them to the resource section of the ISCA website. So we will work on that.
Yeah, that's great. And most of the stuff that I do is loosely based around PowerPoint or keynote presentations. So I can put some notes in there so that it's not just 10 slides with 2 statements on each one, and it actually has more of a lesson plan than just the outline of what I say or anything like that.
Okay. Next question. Is making the child aware of their mindset an effective first strategy to move a fixed mindset child to a growth mindset?
Absolutely. I actually have a chart in my office. I should have put a picture of that in there as well. But it walks through some things that a fixed mindset person might say and a growth mindset person might say. And I think that that's really been an eye-opener for a lot of students. They would say, wow, I really do kind of think that I'm just kind of stuck the way I am. Or they'll say things like, if I keep working at things, then I'll probably get better at it. And that's a good gauge for students to decide, what sort of rethinking they need to do.
Okay. Other than administrative support, what have you found to be the most effective for gaining staff buy-in and support?
Again, I think that's the hard part, because I think my perspective on it at first was these ideas would be things that I would just tell everybody else and they would accept them. I'd almost be like the growth mindset guru, and I know that that didn't work out. So that's why I definitely suggest having either a core group of teachers or even having everyone, if they're willing to do it, or if there's some incentive for them to do it, to just read the book, Mindset. If nothing else, just that first section of it that's about 80 pages or so. That way everybody understands the same perspective. I think that would be the greatest way to get staff buy-in.
Okay. The next question, have you given thought to enlightening parents on this subject of mindsets?
I didn't even mention that. So during our fall conferences, and I probably should have done it during spring conferences, but we were focusing on registering 8th graders for high school classes. But in our spring conferences, we had parent-teacher conferences for 3 or 4 hours each night, and I did a couple of similar presentations to this one just for parents. They weren't really heavily attended, but I had some really good conversations with really, I would say, strategic parents that I think their students could really benefit a lot from it. I did actually make a few phone calls and said, hey, I'm talking about these ideas that I think would really benefit your student, and I'd like it if you showed up. So I think that was actually a really great, a great first step to getting the message out to other parents.
Okay. Let's see. We have one counselor. My entire staff read Dweck's Mindset book this year. What do you suggest as our next step?
I suppose it kind of depends on how things went with that. If it became one of those things, and I've done things like this before, where we talk about a big idea and we want to implement it as a whole staff, and it just sort of fizzles out. If that's the case, maybe just revisit the concepts again in the fall. And then if it's sort of the opposite end of that, if things went well and you feel like it's something that the whole staff is really latched onto, then it might be a good idea to think about how you're going to measure successes with that, or maybe doing some of those student surveys and seeing whether students have, as a whole student body, have adopted growth mindset ideas, or whether there's still some work to do there. And I think that looks like all the questions so far, unless anybody has any others. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, I'll give it a few more seconds, but I want to thank everybody for coming. If you have other specific questions, you can always email me. I'm at tstrodman@west-branch.k12.ia.us. It's just the first letter of my first name and my last name at West Branch. And I thank you all for your time.
Okay, we're going to wrap up today. And again, thank you to Tyler. You will all receive a follow-up email from the webinar. This is our last webinar of the school year, so we are starting to look for topics for next year. So if there's a topic you'd like to see a webinar on, feel free to email us and let us know what those ideas are, and we'll try and put it into the schedule for next year. But again, thank you for joining us today, and have a great afternoon.